And this is why I say we've been lied to about saturated fats. I've eaten a meat-only diet for 365 days. When I started this journey, I weighed 360 pounds. I was a type 2 diabetic. I had over 16 different comorbidities, including autoimmune issues, scleroderma, fibromyalgia, and rheumatoid arthritis. I had fatty liver, and the list continued. In June of 2022, I ended up in the emergency room. This was the point in my life that I either had to choose to go left or right. I had eaten myself to 360 pounds, severe depression, morbidly obese, very sick. I was 32, having to use a walker. In those moments, I decided I didn't actually want to die. I had been being selfish my entire life when I was choosing to binge eat my feelings versus dealing with them. I decided the path to take was carnivore. Now, I do want to mention ahead of time, I have done things like whole food veganism, the Whole30, I've done keto, I've done eating boiled white potatoes only for months at a time. I've tried every single diet before I had gotten to this point. For my carnivore diet, which is my carnivorous lifestyle, I consume meat, dairy, spices, and coffee. For a lot of my journey, I was doing one meal a day. However, I discovered within the past few months, I actually thrive better doing 2 meals a day. So currently that is what I'm doing. In this video, I want to address why I do carnivore, how I stick to carnivore, and what has happened with my health and everything else in the past year of doing this. Why I do carnivore. I mentioned previously that I have done handfuls of other diets, and I do mean handfuls. I was not overweight as a child. I started gaining weight when I was around 12 years old or so. I had some traumatic childhood things happen, and I learned to eat to deal with those. I learned to binge eat. By binge eating, I could eat my feelings and not have to deal with them. So I've tried keto and various things to try to control my appetite. A lot of diets I've ever tried is it requires moderation. Something that I really had to understand about myself is I'm a binge eater. I lack the ability to moderate, and that is okay. But that means I have to choose something that's going to help me be able to abstain, not moderate. This is why I chose carnivore. There's a couple other reasons I chose it as well. I have autoimmune issues. I have a lot of issues with inflammation in my body and being a type 2 diabetic. Carnivore addresses both directly. I completely remove the carbs and the sugars, which is what induces type 2 diabetes, and also it reduces the inflammatory foods that I was eating, things that have oxalates like vegetables and fruits that I no longer have in my diet to reduce my inflammation of my body. How I've stuck to doing carnivore. The biggest thing was understanding that this is a lifestyle change, not a temporary diet. Temporary diets got me where I was at. Something temporary, having these radical food changes, but never actually addressing how I got there or why. Understanding that I had to fundamentally change at my core, and that if I want permanent results, then I have to have permanent change. What's happened in the past year with my health and weight? When I started this journey, I could barely function moving around. I had to use a walker when I left the house. I actually had to use what's called a rollator, has a seat on it, because my back would be so painful with movements. I sometimes wouldn't leave the house for months at a time because I was able to work from home and didn't have to go anywhere. My depression was extremely severe, as well as my anxiety. It was debilitating to the point where I was on so many antidepressants just trying to deal with it. The idea of getting up and having to face a day induced anxiety for me. Honestly, the idea of continuing to breathe did. I was in a very bad place mentally and physically to where I just didn't want to live anymore. I used to tell my husband every morning that I wish I hadn't woken up. I felt like a burden, and I look back and I was, whether he would admit it to me or not, I was a burden on him. I was a burden to myself, and I no longer wanted to be. But that's where I started. And where I am today is I've lost 121 pounds in a year. Within 2 months, I no longer had to use my walker. I was able to do physically things I had not been able to do for years. Let me show you. For you
and I out for our Sunday stroll. It is raining right now, but gonna walk the girls rain or shine. I also got upgraded to 2 dogs. I got Ryu and Rosie. Oh, should have added 2 + 2. Hilltop Park means you're doing switchbacks up the mountain. This is where we're at. You can barely see the tip of our car all the way down at the bottom, and we're not even halfway. We just walked up Lake Watkins Park. We started all the way down at the water down there, and look how beautiful.
So we can see huge changes in my physical movement, but what about my mental? Currently, I take half the amount of antidepressants that I had, and I've been on antidepressants since I was 12 years old. By the end of the summer, I'll be able to be off of them. I have dropped a handful of drugs, but I'll talk about those in a few minutes. My depression is pretty much non-existent. It doesn't mean that I don't still have moments of sadness, but that cloud, that I wish I would die feeling, it no longer exists. That, even if I had not lost any weight, is one of the biggest improvements I've experienced. Having this albatross around my neck, that my very existence was a burden on everybody. And I'm not just talking about my weight. I could have been 120 pounds, just my very existence. That is gone. I actually want to live life. I wake up in the morning excited to do things, excited to be able to go out places. I no longer am fearful that if I go somewhere, I'm going to break a chair, or that I won't fit somewhere, or where am I going to sit down? None of those thoughts go through my head. I feel like I've lost 1,000 pounds just getting those burdens off my mind. As for my anxiety, I don't experience it anymore. It was really debilitating. I actually couldn't drive for a long period of time after I was in an accident. My husband had to drive me everywhere. It was probably quite terrible for him. I've gained my independence back. I never wanted to be alone because I didn't want to be left with those anxious and depressed thoughts. I go places by myself all the time. My husband's probably very appreciative of that as well. But that anxiety of worrying about going out of the house and what are people going to think of me, or God, I really don't want to meet these people because I'm just afraid of what they're going to think of me. It's all gone. My sense of who I am has been solidified. I no longer am just that bag in the wind of if anybody says anything to me, I just fall apart. That has been a great change that I didn't actually imagine would happen, or I didn't know it would happen, I should say. Being able to look at myself in the mirror and know who I am versus looking in the mirror and despising myself. So I've talked about my ability to move, my mental improvements. I want to talk to you about what's actually been going on the inside, about my diagnoses and things like that. Because we've been lied to that saturated fats are unhealthy for us, that we're going to have cardiac issues if we eat meat. This is wholeheartedly not true, and I actually have proof of that. As I stated before, when I started, I was a type 2 diabetic. I am no longer a type 2 diabetic. No, I do not mean my diabetes is in remission. I am no longer a type 2 diabetic. When I started this, my A1C was a 7.1. As of a week ago, it's 4.9. Now that doesn't make me not a diabetic, but what makes me not a diabetic is my insulin resistance when I started was above 13. It is currently 7. That means I am no longer insulin resistant. My liver enzymes were elevated because I started with fatty liver. They started off at 55. They're now 24. And by the way, if you want to see any of this, I've been tracking everything from the start. You can go to carnivorousme.com and you can see all the information there. And you'll see that my markers are trending in the right direction towards healthy. And for the most important, because I know everybody's concerned about my cardiac health, right? Because I eat saturated meats. Well, it turns out my cardiac health is doing excellent. How do I know this? Because I actually see a cardiologist and I've had advanced blood work done when I started, and I just got it done last week. So I want to go over some of these numbers and share them with you. Just so you know, I will be releasing later this week my cardiac visit. I actually recorded it. He was okay with that, and I'll share that with you if you want more information on this. My triglycerides were 343 when I started. They are currently 115. My LDL-C cholesterol started at 148. It's now 145, which isn't much of a change. But what has changed that has improved immensely is my particle sizes for my LDL and my HDL values. My LDL particles have gone down. Initially, they were at 2,158. They are now at 1,860. My LDL medium and LDL small both decreased, as well as my HDL large decreased. My ApoB protein went from 114 to 108. Now I want to point out a lot of those numbers are still elevated. However, they are all headed down, and I will have the same test done in the next 3 to 4 months, again, to be able to compare them. What matters is the trend. And this is why I say we've been lied to about saturated fats. If saturated fats were so bad for us, my blood work would be getting better. I wouldn't be curing diseases. I went from 16 comorbidities to 4, and 3 of the 4 of those are autoimmune issues that I'm still dealing with. However, I didn't mention this, and I should. My autoimmune issues are immensely better. It had gotten to the point where I could hardly use my hands. The pain was so bad. Walking, moving, my knees, my hips, a lot of it was, yes, the weight, but things, non-weight bearing joints shouldn't be hurting like they were. I, as you've seen now, paddleboard, bike ride. I've been able to get back to leather working. I can write with my hand, which I wasn't able to do previously because it hurt so bad. If this was so bad for us, you would see me getting sicker. Oh, but Amanda, give it 10 years. That makes no sense, that argument, because I've had many people say that to me. Things don't get better like this if you're eating something that's toxic for you and then get worse. You will only see a downtrend. So the big question is carnivore for you? And I can't directly answer that, but I can tell you by my experience, it has literally saved my life and my husband's. I don't mention him too often in my channel about his improvement, but my husband was never overweight. He's lost about 29 pounds since we started, and he has no more to lose. But the things have improved immensely for him. He's always experienced low testosterone throughout his life. However, within a year of doing this, he has been able to increase his testosterone 3-fold without taking any medication. It's not just for people who are suffering from being obese. But what I can tell you is my life is completely different. I used to live in this dark cave. That light did not exist. And now, that cave no longer exists. And if you're sitting there suffering right now, no, you have in your power the ability to make a different choice. Whether it's carnivore or ketovore or keto, whatever it is. You have the power to make the choice, to be able to live life because you are worth it. Our value has nothing to do with how much we weigh. It's how much we value ourselves. Thank you if you've made it this far and watched all of this. I appreciate you. And please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. You can help me reach other people who are suffering. Carnivore is not for everyone, and I do not advocate it for every single person. There are those I truly feel can tolerate other foods. But there's people like me who are suffering, that are binge eaters, and depressed and anxious that could have a world of difference by doing this. I appreciate you so much, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.